Okay, hello Algebra 1s. We're going to be trying this video for your notes, and let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start off with a couple of review problems to get back in the swing of things. So the first thing that I'd like for you to do is to write a polynomial with 4 terms, and this polynomial needs to have a degree of 5. So if you'd like to pause the video for a second and do that. Okay, so one example that you might be able to have, okay, is we're starting off with y equals, and we need 4 terms, and the terms are the different pieces, okay? We also need a degree of 5, so that means we can start off with x to the 5th, and if you have a number in front, perfect, that's awesome. We need 3 other terms, because here's our first piece, and we need to have 4 pieces, 4 terms. So we could add something else, so maybe a 7x to the 3rd. Maybe we're going to subtract 2x, and what if we want to have something at the end? So maybe like 192. Okay, this is a polynomial with 4 different terms, and our degree is 5. That's the largest exponent with that polynomial. So for our second review problem, our second warm-up, we need to find the sum of these 2 binomials. Okay, so we're taking this binomial and we're adding it to this binomial. So when we're doing that, we need to add like terms. So we have an x here and we have an x here. You have 1 of these x's and 5 of these x's, so when you add those together, you have 6 of these x's. Now we need to take our other part of our binomial, and we need to see if there's anything else it can go with. So we have 3. We also have, this is like a -2. Okay, if we're minusing 2, that's like adding a negative. So we have 3 and -2. When we put those together, we get 1. Okay, and that 1 is positive. So when we add these 2 binomials together, we get 6x plus 1. Alright, moving on from our review. And if you have any questions, feel free to write down your questions and I can help you out when I get back. So yesterday we talked about the vocabulary of polynomials and then adding and subtracting them. Today we're going to talk about multiplying them. And multiplying polynomials basically is just distributing the terms. Okay, so we're going to review a little bit to kind of get in the swing of things. We've actually done distributing already at the beginning of the year. So for question number 1, we have this first term, which is a 2, and we're multiplying it by this binomial. And so what you normally do is you take that 2 and you multiply it to both terms inside, just like this. So 2 times x, well, that just gets you 2x. And then we take 2 and we multiply it by the second term, 2 times 2. Well, that gets us 4. Since they're both positive, we are adding. Okay, so 2 times this quantity, x plus 2, that binomial, gets us 2x plus 4. Not that bad. For number 2, same idea. Okay, we're going to distribute that x into both terms, so x times 2x. Okay, that's going to give us 2x squared, because remember, x times x is x squared, since we're multiplying. Now we take that x and we multiply it times our second term. Now be careful, because here we're subtracting, so that's like a negative. Okay, so our answer when we have x times 1 is going to give us 1x, and we are subtracting that, since we're subtracting here in the original problem. So 2x squared minus 1x, or you could also say 2x squared minus x, is the answer when we distribute that x into that binomial. For 3, we're going to take -7 and we're going to multiply it into both of these. You guys are starting to get the hang of it, I'm sure. So -7 times x is -7x. Ooh, those are bad. And -7 times +7 is -49, okay, or -49. So our answer when we multiply this into both terms is negative 7x minus 49. And for the last one, okay, looks a little different because the 5 here is at the end, but since we're multiplying, you can switch around the orders, okay? So you can write this as 5 times x minus 3. And so we do the same thing. We take that 5 and we multiply it into both terms of this binomial. So 5 times x gives us 5x, and 5 times 3 gives us 15. And remember, we're subtracting here, okay? So it's kind of like a negative times a positive gives us a negative, which is subtracting. So that's how you do the easy ones. Okay, we did this at the beginning of the year. So what happens if we want to try some harder ones? Okay, so we've been multiplying polynomials. We're kind of in like the pee-wee leagues. What if we want to go pro? What if we want to multiply by a trinomial? Okay, so we're going to multiply a number or maybe a variable times a trinomial, 3 parts. It's the same thing, it's just that we have to do it one extra time. Okay, so we're going to take this 3 and multiply it by x squared. Okay, 3 times x squared gives us 3x squared. We take that 3 and we multiply it by the next part, 2x. So 3 times 2x gets us 6x. Since they're both positive, we are adding. And for the very last part, we take 3 times 1. And 3 times 1 is 3. And they're both positives, so you add them. So our answer when we multiply this 3 into this trinomial is 3x squared plus 6x plus 3. Alright, so let's try number 6. We're going to take this 5x and multiply it to each term. So 5x times 2x squared. Okay, we multiply our coefficients. So 5 times 2 is 10. So we have 10. And x times x squared. Okay, remember x squared is like x times x. So we have x right here. And we have x times x. So when we multiply those together, we have 3 of them. So x cubed. So 10x cubed. When we multiply this times our first term. So if we multiply, moving on to our next step, 5x and x. Okay, keeping in mind that we're subtracting. So 5x times x is going to give us 5 times 1, the coefficient here. 5 times 1 is 5. And then x times x gives us x squared. Okay, so just like how x and x times x gave us x cubed, x and x gives us x squared. And remember, we're subtracting, so we're subtracting here because a positive and a negative makes a negative. We're subtracting. And for our very last term, taking 5x and multiplying it by 4. So we multiply the coefficients. 5 times 4 is 20. And x is still in there. So we have a 20x. They're positives, so positive here, so we're going to be adding. So let's try the last one, number 7. We're multiplying negative 2 into this trinomial. So negative 2 times x to the third gets us negative 2x to the third. If we multiply negative 2 times positive 2x squared, okay, a negative times a positive is a negative, and 2 times 2 is 4, and then we'll just have to have that x squared there, okay, because negative 2 times 2x squared gives us 4x squared. And for the last one, negative 2 times a negative 5. A negative times a negative makes a positive, and 2 times 5 is 10. Okay, so when we distribute that in, we get negative 2x to the third minus 4x squared plus 10, which is a trinomial, 3 parts. So this is the foundation of everything that we're going to do today. Okay, the only thing that changes is that instead of taking one term times a trinomial or a binomial or even something bigger, is that we have a binomial times a binomial or a binomial times a trinomial. So how do we do this? it gets a little more complicated because we have to take each part, each term, and multiply it by the other terms in the end. So we have to take this x and multiply it times that first term, and we have to multiply it by that last term, that second term. So let's do that real quick. X times x. That's just x squared. Okay? So x times x is x squared. And we're going to take x times 3. So that gives us 3x. We're adding those because both of these are positive. So that's what happens when I multiply x times these two terms in the binomial back here. Now, I'm going to change my color here real quick. Alright, so we need to take the second term and multiply it by both of these. Okay, so the 1 times x, that gets us 1x. And we're adding those because both of those are positive. And at the end, 1 times 3. So that is 3. Both of them are positive, so that's why it's a plus. So when we put these together, we combine our like terms. So x squared is the only x squared part. And in the middle, we have a 3x and we have a 1x. Those are going to be able to combine together. And we only have one number part. So let's combine our like terms. 3x and 1x is 4x. And then we have an x squared. We're adding that. And we're adding 3 at the very end. Okay. So when we multiply our two binomials together, we get a trinomial. Okay, and we have to remember to combine like terms. So this should be our answer at the very end. So there's kind of a nifty little way to remember this. The memory trick is called FOIL, F-O-I-L. And that just means the F part stands for multiplying the first terms. The O stands for multiplying the outside. Okay, so going back to our example, the F stands for multiplying our first, so x times x. The O stands for multiplying our outsides, so x times 3, got us 3x. The I stands for multiplying the inside terms, so 1 times x. And the L stands for multiplying the last terms. Okay, so that 1 times the 3, which got us 3. So if you do this, when you multiply a binomial by a binomial, it will work itself out. You combine like terms, and you will get your answer. First, outside, inside, last. Foiling. So let's try that with 9 and 10 here. We're going to FOIL them. So if you want, you can do your double distribution here. You're going to distribute your x to your x, your firsts. So write that up here. FOIL. So first times first, x times x. Well, that gets us x squared. Then we're going to do our outsides. X times 4. Well, that's 4x. And we are adding those because both of them are positive. So plus 4x. Now we need to do our insides. Okay. So remember, this is kind of like a negative 2. So we're going to take that negative 2 and multiply it by x. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x, or minus 2x. And then we take that and we multiply it by our last one. We multiply our last. So negative 2 times 4 is negative 8, or minus 8. So now we have to combine like terms. Our like terms are right here in the middle. So 4x minus 2x gets us 2x. We have that x squared hanging out. We're adding that because that was a positive. 4 minus 2 is a positive 2. And then at the end, we subtract 8. So that is our answer. X squared plus 2x minus 8. So not too bad. You guys try number 10 on your own. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we'll pause the video here for a second, and then we'll start it back up and you guys can check your answer. Alright, so let's double check here. We're going to need to FOIL these. Okay, or another way we can say that is double distribute. So we're going to take x times 2x. So x times 2x is 2, and x times x is x squared, so 2x squared. Alright, let's try our outsides here. So x times 6. So 6 times x is 6x. We're going to be adding those since both of these are positives. So far we have 2x squared plus 6x. Let's try our inside, see what we get. 3 times 2x. Well, that is 6x. Since they're both positive, we're adding that. And for our last terms, 3 times 6. 3 times 6 is 18. We're adding that because both of those are positives. So this was kind of a nice problem. We didn't have any negatives to worry about or any minus signs. So we combine our like terms, 6x and 6x. That gives us 12x. We still have our 2x squared, and we're adding that 12x, and at the end we're adding the 18. So that will be our answer, 2x squared plus 12x plus 18. And if I'm going too fast, you can always pause it. For the last one, multiplying two binomials together, we're going to do the same thing. Okay, so if you guys want to pause it again, get a little practice in, and then you guys can double check your work. Okay, so if we're going to check our work here, we're going to FOIL this. First, outside, inside, and last, scroll down a little bit. So our first, 2x times 3x. Well, 2 times 3 is 6, and x times x is x squared. Okay, if we take our outsides, 2x times, this is like a negative 4. So 2 times negative 4 is negative 8 or minus 8, and then you can't forget your x. Okay, so minus 8x. That comes from multiplying the firsts and then the outsides. So let's try our insides here. 1 times 3x. Well, that's just 3x. Okay, and they're both positive, so that means we're adding. Positives are like adding. And for our lasts, 1 times a negative 4. 1 times negative 4 here gives us minus 4, just like a negative 4. So now we need to combine all our terms. The middle guys here, the x's. So we're going to have 6x squared. And if we have negative 8x and positive 3x, when we put those together, we're going to have minus 5x. And then at the very end, minus 4. So that's our answer. That's what we get when we multiply those two binomials together. Normally, we call that whole process double distributing, okay? Because that just works a little bit better when it comes to the harder things that we're going to do. So, you distribute both terms in the first binomial into the polynomial afterwards. Okay, so this is nice when we get to polynomials that are bigger. Okay, so this is a trinomial. You can't really FOIL when you're multiplying this times this. So that's why we call it double distribution. We're going to distribute both of these guys into all of these terms in our second one. So let me show you how this is done. We take x times x squared. So x times x squared. Well, there's one x here, there's two x's here, so when you multiply them, there are 3 x's. So x to the third. Now we need to take that x and multiply it by the middle term, x times x. Well, x times x, there are 2 of them, so that's x squared. Since these are both positives, we're going to be adding that. And for our last distribution here, x times 3. X times 3 is 3x. And we're adding those because both of them are positive. So that's half of what we need to do. The other half is multiplying the second term here times everything. So 1 times x squared. Well, that's 1x squared. Okay, and we're going to be adding that because both of these are positives. If we take 1 and multiply it by our middle term back here, 1 times x, well, that's plus 1x. Both of those are positives. And for our last one, 1 times 3. 1 times 3 is just 3. And we're adding that because both of those are positives. So when we combine our like terms, we have to look through all of these and see which ones are the same. So we have an x squared, we have a 3x, we have a 3x. Those are our like terms. Let's put those together. So we're going to have x to the third. When we have x squared and x squared, that's going to be 2 of those x squareds. Okay, you don't change the exponent because we're adding in this case. We're not multiplying. So you have 1 plus 1. So 1 plus 1, that's 2 of these x squareds. Let's combine our x's now. So we have 3x and we have 1x. So 3x plus 1x is 4x. Adding that, they're both positives. And at the end, we have plus 3. So he's just kind of chilling, chillaxing, hanging out at the end. So this is our answer. When we multiply this binomial times a trinomial, we get x cubed plus 2x squared plus 4x plus 3. So a couple more steps involved, but that's to be expected because we're dealing with some bigger polynomials. We're multiplying some bigger things together. We're probably going to get things that are a little bit bigger. So let's try 13 here. So we're going to take 2x and multiply it by the first thing back here. So 2x times x squared. Okay, we have an x here and we have 2 x's here. So we're going to have 3 x's. So we're going to have an x cubed, and 2 times 1 is 2. So 2x cubed. Let's take that 2x and multiply it by the middle now. Now keep in mind, this is a negative, okay, because we're subtracting. It's like a negative. So 2x times negative 2x. Well, that's negative 4. 2 times 2 is 4. And x times x is x squared. So minus 4x squared. That's from the middle terms. And the last one for this guy, 2x times 4. We multiply the coefficients. 2 times 4 is 8. And we have an x. So 8x. We're going to be adding those because they're both positives. So adding. Now let's try and see what happens when we take our last term and distribute it into everything. So 3 times x squared gets us 3x squared. We're adding that because they're both positives. We take 3 and multiply it by this negative 2x. So 3 times negative 2x is negative 6x. And for our last one, 3 times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. And we're adding that because they're both positives. So let's combine like terms. Don't have any doubles for the x cubed. We do for the x squareds though. So we have an x squared there, an x squared there. And we have an x, and we have an x. So we're going to combine these two together, and we're going to combine these two together. So for our answer, we're going to have 2x cubed. When we take a negative 4x squared and a positive 3x squared, we take these and we put them together, we get negative 1x squared, or minus 1x squared. Same thing, because we have negative 4 and we have positive 3. When we combine these two together, 8x minus 6x. So 8 minus 6 is 2. Talking about our x's, it was a positive 2 because we have more positives than we do negatives. So that's how we got 2x. And then at the very end, chilling out, our constant is plus 12. Okay? So that will be our answer. You guys are almost there. The light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, so if you guys want, you can pause this, double check your answers. That might be a good thing to do. We're going to do the same procedure. Okay, so we're going to multiply there, there, and there, and then go like this. Okay? Okay, so if we have x squared times x squared, okay, we have 2x's here and 2x's here. So when we put those together, we have 4x's, right, all being multiplied together. So that will be x to the 4th. If we take x squared and multiply it by a negative 2x, or minus 2x, okay, our coefficients will get us minus 2, and then x squared times x is x to the 3rd. If we take x squared and multiply it by 1, well, that's just x squared. And we're adding that because both of those are positives. Alright, let's try our second term here. So we're going to take x times x squared. No, we're going to have 1 here, 2 here, so x cubed. We're adding that because they're both positives. If we take x times minus 2x, it's going to be minus 2, and then x times x is x squared. And for our last one, I'm running out of room here, x times 1. Well, that's just 1x, so plus 1x. Now we need to combine like terms if we can. We have an x cubed, x squared, x squared. Okay, so 2 sets of like terms. So we're going to bring down the x to the 4th. We're going to combine these two right here. So negative 2x cubed and x cubed makes negative 1x cubed. And if we combine the next pair of like terms, x squared minus 2x squared. So 1 minus 2 is minus 1 x squared. And then at the very end, our loner here, kind of like Mr. Johnson, no friends, hanging out by himself, would be plus 1x. So that's what we have at the end, plus 1x. And if you don't want, you don't have to have the 1s in here, okay? Because really there's like an invisible 1 right here. So your answer, if you really wanted to be fancy, x to the 4th minus x to the 3rd minus x squared plus x. Alright, for 15. If you guys want, you can work through that. Otherwise, we're going to steamroller through it and then get you guys your homework so you guys can work on that. So we take x times 4x squared. Well, it's going to get us 4. 1 times 4 is 4. X times x squared is x to the 3rd. Then we take x times 3x. Okay, so that's 3. 1 times 3 is 3. X times x is x squared. We're adding those together because they're both positives. Now, we need to take x times, that's like a negative 1. So, x times negative 1 is negative 1x. So that takes care of that first term, distributing it in. Now we're going to take this second term. So this is like a negative 2 times 4x squared. So negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. And then we have that x squared. Just like that. Let's try our next one. So negative 2 times 3x. So negative 2 times 3 is negative 6 or minus 6. And then we have an x. And for the last one, negative 2 times negative 1. Remember, a negative times a negative makes a positive. So negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2, or plus 2. So if we combine like terms, got an x squared, got an x, and got an x. Alright, so let's bring down our 4x to the third. Let's combine these two right here. So 3x squared minus 8x squared. So 3 minus 8 gives us 5, negative. So minus 5x squared. And then we combine these two. Negative 1x, negative 6x. So negative 7x, or minus 7x. And then we have the loner at the ends, the plus 2. And that's all you really need to do. Okay? So that is our answer. When you multiply those two polynomials together, that binomial times this trinomial. So, if you have any questions, make sure to write them down in your paper. Or if you want to write them down on your homework, I will be more than glad to look at them and to get you guys answers when I'm back in class. And other than that, good luck. Make sure to do the homework. And behave for the subs. Thanks, guys. I will see you soon.